and welcome to the Hourglass First Friday Forum in December. Can't believe we've made it to December in 2020, but here we are. I want to start, first of all, by thanking Rogers & Associates, who've been a longtime sponsor of these First Friday Forums. We thank them for their support. And we also thank the Ware Center at Millersville, where we would be if it were not for COVID and doing these virtually. So I can't wait to get back there, but until then, we'll thank them virtually. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panel today. We've got a great topic, the Lancaster Countywide Action Plan for clean water in the county. So Allyson Gibson, the coordinator for Clean Water Partners, is here. Hello, Allyson. Gordon Hoover is part of the CAP coordinator team, and he is from the Lancaster Farmland Trust. Joellyn Warren is also on the CAP coordinator team. She's from David Miller Associates. And then Matt Kofroth, I think I said that right, maybe not. I practiced earlier. He's on the CAP coordinator team as well, and is from Lancaster County Conservation District. So thanks so much for being here today. And without further ado, I will kick it off to our panelists.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here. And we are eager to share our story of clean water in Lancaster County. Many of you have been part of that story for years. And so we're going to get started with some of the updates of what's happening lately. Specifically, we have this countywide action plan. So I started off with a screen that is meant to be interactive. So if you get a chance to text a response as the directions there at the top, or respond on the website link, this question is kind of basic. What does it actually mean to you to have clean water? Does it mean that what comes out of your tap is safe? Does it mean that you can fish in the creek in your backyard? Does it mean that land use across the county is done in a certain way? There's so many answers, so many things that make it personal to you. So if you get a chance to respond to that, it'll automatically show up here on the screen. Looking for any responses that you all have as priorities for you and your work. So as that comes through, we'll be able to see some of those changes. But one of the main stories that we want to share is about clean and clear by 2040. The goal of the Lancaster Clean Water Partners, we're operating with a bias towards action. So you can see that from some of the volunteers and the many partners in this photo that are part of Donegal Trout Unlimited. This is a project that they've been working on as a riparian buffer. So a welcome to you all. I'm eager to share our story today. We're going to hear from our panelists that serve as our CAP coordinator, but there's a lot of acronyms. There's a lot of people involved in the clean water world. So let's get started on what some of those details are. I mentioned the Lancaster Clean Water Partners. We are a group that is comprised of lots of other groups. So a collective impact effort. Many of you with the Hourglass are familiar with the collective impact model and really appreciate the amazing groundwork that has been laid by others here in Lancaster County with that model, the success of it. And we're leaning on you and the amazing work that's happened, how we can be successful with this work in the clean water world. We know that the work has to be done in a collaborative way. A lot of strong leaders have come together. The work started with the Clean Water Partners about four and a half years ago. With a group of 5, they knew that that had to be bigger. There had to be more voices at the table. And we've now expanded to a steering committee of about 16. Stakeholders or partners group is really unlimited. Anybody who's interested in clean water and doing something in that world can be part of the Lancaster Clean Water Partners. So you can see a graphic here of the structure. It's very loose, but a structure as we are as the partners. Altogether, our goal with that common vision is clean and clear water in Lancaster County by 2040. So what does it really mean to be a partner? We're trying to be more specific about that. Be really intentional about what you give to the partnership and that collaborative effort, and then what you get back. Being very clear about what the benefits are of being a partner. So we encourage you to sign up. Even if you've been part of the partnership, been working with many of the organizations that are part of clean water work, we encourage you to sign up so that you get the right information. One of our goals is consistent communication. So we want to make sure that the right emails, the right connections are happening for you to be taking action, to be operating with that bias towards action. So we encourage you to sign up. We're going to make sure you get all the links on the slides here along the way, and you can click to find out more, to sign up, to take action on these things along the way.
Allyson, can I interrupt here a quick second? I got a message from attendee wondering if we could see that initial slide with those text options again, or if
Sure.
we'd be able to put those in. Thank you. There we are. Thanks.
Sure. Jonathan, I wonder, would you mind copying them down and putting them in either the chat box or Q&A? Then people can reference them along the way. And that's a great point that I'll come back to this at the end. We'll see what things have popped up here in our word cloud.
Sounds good.
Okay. I've got a couple breaks in the presentation today for Q&A. Happy to take questions along the way. If there's something that needs clarification, feel free to put that in the Q&A option on your Zoom browser. I'll get us back here to what we have as a group is called the Common Agenda, and that's really our anchor that brings us together with a shared vision of clean and clear water by 2040, and the shared mission. We want to make sure everybody is moving at a faster pace and has an expanded capacity to do the clean water work that has to happen in Lancaster County. The Common Agenda is the document that lays out how we're going to get there. So the problem that we start with is that more than half of Lancaster County's streams are considered impaired, and that's for aquatic life. So that means that the water in our creeks is not healthy enough to sustain even the basic bug life. You could get into the science of macroinvertebrates and what the calculation number is of this kind of bug versus that one, and there is amazing science going into it from partners like Stroud and the Susquehanna River Basin Commission and Matt Kofroth working with volunteer groups. All of that comes together, the data comes together to tell us that picture. The problem, though, is pretty basic, that the water is unhealthy. And Lancaster County, out of the entire 64,000 square mile Chesapeake Bay watershed, we are the biggest restoration opportunity. We have the highest amount of nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment. So it all comes down to the local waterways, though. What can we do in the local waterways? And that's to build this local multi-sector collaborative effort. So the Lancaster Clean Water Partners coming together is pulling together so many different ways that people are working on clean water across the county, using that common agenda to take things off of that impaired list. All those creeks that aren't healthy enough to support the bug life or to be healthy enough for us to swim in. That's our goal, is to get the water to a healthy level. So we revised our common agenda this spring because of things like the change in the goals that we have for the state requirements, and I'll get into some of those details. But our common agenda still, it recognizes that problem and the solution, but really nitty gritty of priority strategies and the progress indicators. So we wanted to make sure all of this is aligning because it really kickstarted us for some new opportunities, like having our CAP coordinator. So one of those revised priorities is the scaled use of sustainable proven practices to have success with our countywide action plan. So you guys know that's the topic for today, and we have that as one of our revised priorities. You see some examples of success stories here, from green infrastructure to agricultural practices and riparian buffers. So any questions about the partners? There's lots more details we could go into about collective impact side of things, but I want to make sure that we get into our CAP coordinator pieces. Jonathan just flagged for me if I'm missing something in the Q&A.
We're good to go.
Okay. So the opportunity, how are we going to do this? A quick snapshot of what's happening across the state. What's outlined here in black is the Chesapeake Bay drainage area. So the watershed of Pennsylvania that drains to the Chesapeake. And then the color coding is the county approach that the Department of Environmental Protection is using for this action planning work. Lancaster and York County are tier 1. So we are the first place that has the biggest priority and the first place that the planning started. So in 2018, that's when we wrote our first countywide action plan. Now we're in the implementation phase. And so this is what it looked like. We had the chance to look at some of the data, use the numbers understand why Lancaster County is the top priority. And this is what the process looked like. So we had these action teams and we got to identify our own local priorities. So we know what the state goals are, and they gave local teams the opportunity to say, okay, we know we have to reduce nitrogen by 21%, but how are you going to do that? Maybe in Lancaster, it makes a lot of sense to put in parks, and maybe in York County, it makes sense to do it in a completely different way. So the opportunity was really local, and we wrote the plan to work for Lancaster County. We still made sure our goals were aspirational, but realistic. So what that actually looked like is the plan that we came up with. It had to address this. Even if you can't read all the details there, just know that the bar at the top is Lancaster. That's our nitrogen goal. Ours is about 11 million pounds, and that's huge compared to other counties across the state. So it really is a big lift. This opportunity is a way to make the goals, make the work that happens in Lancaster fit the goals. So we have this chance to make it work for us. We know that the biggest opportunity for nitrogen in particular is within the agriculture sector. So looking at where some of the nitrogen is coming from, we know that agriculture is one of the biggest opportunities. So we want to be really intentional about how we do the outreach, about how we do the mapping, about how we make sure that the funding is set up to support our agricultural landowners across the county. So the CAP coordination, the Countywide Action Plan, like I said, a lot of acronyms here, and trying to keep it clear between things. You might have heard of the WIP, the Watershed Implementation Plan, and there is a state WIP that EPA is requiring from all of the states in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. So the CAP is a Countywide Action Plan that meets the state's goals. There are many different counties, like you saw on that map, that have to do this. Lancaster's overlaps with the state goals, but makes it unique to us. So some of the 2020 highlights, like I said, we've now shifted to implementation. So we have this CAP management team, and you'll get to hear from them later on today. We have an implementation grant. So we got funds for this CAP coordinator, as well as to get projects in the ground. There's been a lot of clean water work happening for a long time, which is fantastic and has made amazing progress, but we have to scale up. We talked about sustainable funding and scaled up and pace that gets stronger and faster. So there is funds from DEP to do that on some levels. Permitting pre-application process. DEP has given the Lancaster Clean Water Partners and our CAP coordinator team a time on the schedule dedicated to looking at pre-application meetings for projects that will meet the CAP goals. We are happy to take any projects that you all know of. We are happy to take things at any status point. It can be just a concept idea. It can be something that you have a project lead or a designer or engineer that's ready to hand it in, and you just want to review before you hit that submit button to make sure there's no technical review issues later on. DEP has given those opportunities to make sure the permitting process gets smoother and can happen more quickly. We can get the projects on the ground. You see something mentioned here about Field Doc. There is a tracking tool at the state level, and we'll get into some of those details, making sure that the data is collected for the work happening. All of the work that's happening on the ground, we want to make sure it gets counted. And so understanding those streams of data that are talking behind the scenes, make sure that's all happening smoothly and we're getting credit for all those nutrient reductions along the way. And then annual reports and reporting to DEP and to EPA along the way. So a few of the highlights of what's happened in our first year of setting up this CAP coordinator team. So, but CAP what? What does that mean? We wrote this thing. Some of it we said, yeah, we know it's a goal. We have to do it, but we'll get to it later. And Joellyn loves to remind me, it's later. It's time to get to some of these things. So what we've realized is we wrote the plan, and as we're now shifting to implementation, everything that we put in there is possible. It's seriously underfunded and understaffed, but we can fix that. What does it really mean, though, to take the steps, to put the steps in place that will get us there, and who is leading it? I talked about the projects and some of them that are happening. This is a list of the projects that it's the projects that we've prioritized for this year based on applications that came in and the dollars that we had for these CAP projects in 2020. A couple great examples. This is a project at Worth at Hollow Farm in the Octorara watershed. A landowner worked with NRCS to get funding for some stream bank stabilization. She had riparian buffers planted a few years ago. The farm is a veterans equine therapy farm, family owned for many years. She's super interested in conservation. So our funding helped continue and grow the work that's happening there. Culleton Park, that just had the ribbon cutting in downtown Lancaster, a perfect example of green infrastructure that's been in the works for a long time, but part of the funding for that project was from the CAP implementation grant. So great examples of how making sure all of the audiences across Lancaster County are seeing the benefits, are having that they have the resources to make sure that the project can happen. You can click on this link and read some more of our success stories later on with the links from the slides. Just a couple examples of how we're getting projects on the ground. How are we doing that? There's action teams in place to help guide that work. Joellyn and Matt and Gordon are all part of that action team leadership group. And it's really important that we have the experts who know about agriculture, who know about stormwater and MS4 permitting to help guide what's going to be in these templates so that everything is detailed for the steps that have to be in place to match each of those goals in the CAP. But you all can be part of the action teams too. We need lots of voices. We need people who are in the trenches of some of these projects, and then some people who are really good at strategy. So we encourage you to join our action teams. Even if you can't do it every meeting, that's okay. We want to make sure that we have as many voices at the table as possible. Our action teams schedules are on the website, so you can see past meeting agendas as well as what's coming up next. Also, at the end of the slides today, you can review more details. There's a slide for each action team. So if you want to get a better picture of, well, what do they really do? Or what are some of the opportunities for me to get involved? There's a slide for each one at the end of today that we won't spend time on in the presenting because I want to be able to hear from our experts, but you can get more details there. And the CAP annual report, this is a document that we needed to turn into DEP, but it also really helped frame the work for us in a published way that we can share with you all. It really is a strategy for how we can do this work in a priority format. It lays out all the best management practices that are important and will reach those goals, but it's in digestible language. There's a model that the Chesapeake Bay uses. So we might not have the exact language that that model needs, but it's going to make more sense for those of us reading this document. So the CAP annual report, it calls out those key findings, the challenges, priority initiatives, but then we wanted to flag some of the things that are not necessarily a practice that you would do, but it's a policy change. It's a regulatory change that has to happen. We want to make sure that we're coordinating with state agencies like PennDOT. We want to make sure that we're using monitoring of the water quality to show progress. We want to make sure that the experts at the table are part of the conversation here for progress and programmatic changes along the way as well. So this is a PDF you can get on our website as well. We can send that as a follow-up document. One of the things I said in the beginning about the CAP was that this is totally doable. And so I encourage you all to take something like this annual report and say, well, how can I integrate this? Maybe my company is redoing its strategic plan and I can make sure that clean water is in here somehow. Maybe my church group is starting to look at land use a little differently, or we're starting to feel the pressure of the MS4 permit in our municipality. How can the CAP and this narrative, the strategy for Lancaster's clean water, how can I lean on this and the work that's gone in here as a collaborative to make sure that we're all playing our part? We're all supporting this plan for its success, because it really is about Lancaster's quality of life. This is a tool that we want to be useful for everybody across Lancaster County. So a couple quick examples of what does that look like. This is a picture of a drag line. So injecting dairy manure after harvest, it conserves the nutrients. We talk about nitrogen and phosphorus. This is the exact way that it can happen. And our agricultural landowners are doing these kinds of practices now to make a difference in local water quality. But it takes a decision, it takes outreach to say to your neighbor, well, let's try it there, or have you thought about this? So a quick snapshot of one best management practice that's happening. This is a riparian buffer. So when you're driving along the highway and you see these tubes sticking up, they're all baby trees. We need more of those. We need the space along the stream line, the stream banks, to have more trees, to have more grass, to have fences that keep our livestock out so that those areas can be healthy filters. all the rain running off of our land, no matter what kind of land use it is, those plants serve as a filter and soak up the nutrients. So we need more plants, especially along our stream banks, and a buffer is an example of how we're doing that in lots of different places across the county. So a quick look at the revised priorities. We've mentioned that we revised the entire common agenda and are really leaning on that. That's what's framing our 2021 goals. So as we look together, how do we move forward in 2021? We want to make sure that our priority streams, we're using a regional approach for that. We're looking at it by watershed. It may not always be the same as a political boundary, but a watershed approach helps bring us together for the land use, for the priorities of that region. A delisting strategy is one way that's helping us do that. We're looking at a small catchment, so a small stretch of stream that we know is really close to being healthy enough to support those bugs that would take it off of the federally impaired list. The delisting strategy is something, again, there's more details later on, and I'm happy to answer questions about that if we want to get into the delisting. But it's an exciting approach to work with landowners at a local level and all the partners that can help with that stretch of stream. I mentioned the pre-application meeting. We want to make sure we're taking the projects to DEP that Lancaster partners have kind of in the queue, and we want to get them pushed through quickly to get them in the ground. MS4 feedback. Just this week, DEP said to us, it's not an official public comment period, but we want to make sure that we have feedback about the next MS4 permit. And what did we learn from this one? And what are the needs on the ground to make sure that it works with the CAP, with the local goals? So that was one example of how we want to make sure that Lancaster's voice is really strong there. We're listening and we're reaching out. We want to reach out to you guys more often to understand what's the feedback we should be taking to the state agencies and those opportunities. Aligning ordinances, maybe the buffer requirements of one municipality next door to another don't match. And so it's hard to do watershed approaches when we have conflicting ordinances or regulations. So trying to work together as teams with that watershed strategy, but going through some of the nitty-gritty details. So we're going to be working on that as well. And using our action teams, using those experts to make sure that we're addressing the monitoring needs. We're aligning with things like Places 2040. We're aligning with things like transportation plans, the existing planning work, the existing implementation work. It's all got to align and everybody's got to be on the same page. So making sure our priorities in 2021 reflect that. That is our main goal as we look at our watershed approach. So back to you all. That's a lot of content that we just put out there really quickly. So I encourage you, grab a piece of paper, like a physical piece of paper, and write on it, how are you feeling? Either excited, please tell me more. I am really overwhelmed, but we got this. Yeah, I'm confident. Or I need dessert. It's after 12 o'clock. I need something sugary. Or something else that may be important to you. I'm curious to see from you all. And I know, Jonathan, that we have ourselves as the presenters here, but I encourage you to actually write it down because that makes it more real to you as somebody listening to a presentation. And maybe it's better for you to put it in the chat, in the Q&A. If you can put your answer there, we know that you guys are participating. We can get some feedback. We can adjust other information that we want to share with you today.
Well, while folks are doing that, maybe a good time to adjust some of the content-specific questions that have come up here.
Sure.
One of them is that we answered. Okay, good. We answered. Matt answered one of them. Another one came in from Nelson Longenecker of Four Seasons. Said, would a commercial-scale rainwater harvesting effort on a commercial property expansion to reduce stormwater runoff fit the kind of projects being encouraged?
Absolutely. Joellyn, do you want to take that one in particular? That's a perfect example.
Yeah, that's a perfect example where we're reaching out to a kind of non-traditional sector where we're a commercial industrial partner, going above and beyond meeting the minimum requirements. So if if you're putting in a new parking lot or an addition or some kind of impenetrable surface, you would have to combat that new stormwater need. But if you're going above and beyond and you're collecting all the stormwater for all your rooftops and driveways and that sort of thing, absolutely. That's where we encourage innovative practices on non-traditional land. And the other thing is just making sure that it's getting counted. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. There is a multitude of systems that will be reporting back are kind of chipping away of the requirements for reductions. But this something like that might be because you don't need a permit and you're just doing it because you think it's a really great project. We just have to make sure that it's getting counted so that it counts towards our total reduction goals. And so there'll be some more on that. But if you ever have questions, I think Matt and the ENS team at the Conservation District are your go-tos on that kind of upfront permitting process and reporting.
And we've got, I do see the two other questions here. They are excellent, and I can't wait to get to them maybe after the presentation's finished here. So I don't want to take any time away because I know we got a lot to go through, but we will get to them eventually.
All right. So just calling it out for you all, you'll get the link to these slides later. There's a lot more at the end, and that will get you some more details. Just want to say that we're open to lots of conversations. We want to make sure that you get the information and you have the resources to stay engaged, to support the plan, to use the CAP in ways that it works for you and for your work. So these are the three people on our team that are available anytime. Myself, Emily Smedley, and John Cox is our senior advisor. So calling out their contact information here so you can feel free to reach out. We've been talking about this CAP coordinator team though. And it's not just one person. We need an entire team in Lancaster County because there's so much going on. There's so many good things happening. And so I want to introduce you all to our CAP coordinator team. Land Studies is one of our team members, and unfortunately they're not able to join us today, but Mike LaSala and Laurel Etter-Longenecker are part of that group from Land Studies. Lancaster Farmland Trust with Jeff Swinehart, Jeb Musser, and Gordon Hoover. Gordon's with us today as part of our panel. And with David Miller Associates, we have Joellyn Warren. And the Conservation District, I call them out here at the top. They are the lead partner from the funding side, from the administrative side as the government agency. And my position with the Clean Water Partners is housed officially within the district. So I'm happy to work with Matt Kofroth at the Conservation District on many different levels here. And I'm glad that all three are able to join us today. So I am going to stop sharing so you all can see their fun faces here as panelists. And Jonathan, I know we have some questions. I'm going to just get things started with a few prompting questions to our CAP coordinator team. So this is a question for everybody. Matt, I think you might be able to address it first, but what does implementation actually look like? We've said that we've started with this plan writing and we were aspirational but realistic, and now we've shifted to implementation. What does that actually look like? Because we've been doing clean water work in Lancaster County for a long time. So thinking about the CAP, what's different?
Yeah, I mean, the clean water has been a priority for Lancaster for a while. I would say the implementation part of it is more getting projects on the ground. We've done a lot of planning. We've done a lot of prioritizing. We've done a lot of designs and come up with sketch plans and ideas. But the implementation part of what we're talking about now is actually putting things on the ground and getting them in the ground in a timely fashion. There's a time window here. You didn't mention, but there is a time window we have to get a lot of these things accomplished by, and it's a very short window. It's 2025. A lot of it is very aspirational, but we also want to show that we're making progress. So the implementation is getting the things on the ground, and it could be stormwater best management practices, it could be agricultural best management practices, it could be stream practices. So it's everything that is in Lancaster County that can be counted for in regards to nutrient and sediment reductions toward that ultimate goal. That's what the implementation is. So the planning and design are great, but now we need to move on to that implementation aspect.
Yeah, I would echo Matt's comments that the conservation efforts are really starting to focus more strongly on the implementation aspect. And one of the challenges that CAP is addressing is data. Before, as we were more focused on outreach and so forth, we don't have a great data set, or complete data set, I should say, on practices that have been implemented, on practices that need to be implemented, farms that have plans, farms that don't have plans. So through field docs, through practice keepers, those are two data sets that are being developed, as we speak and reformed and becoming user friendly. But like any industry, any business, data is the key. And understanding what we've done, where we've been, and where we need to get to with BMPs that need to be implemented is going to be key to accomplishing, this WIP process, WIP plan. So that's one of the keys that the CAP team's working on, trying to coordinating these data sets, getting information into the data set so that we have a better understanding of what's being done. We have so many, especially in the ag side, so many farms that implemented their own BMPs without cost share, or maybe they didn't even have a farm plan. So there's a lot of great things being done in agriculture that just aren't documented. So that's another focus of the CAP team and trying to address implementation.
Thanks, Gordon. Thanks, Matt. So kind of jumping off of that, how is the CAP coordinator team using some of the Lancaster Clean Water Partners structure, this collaborative collective impact effort? We put in place a number of structures or resources. Is the CAP coordinator team leaning on that at all to help move things along?
Yeah, I'll take that because it's probably most relevant to the work that I'm doing in coordinating the action teams and having them kind of be the soldiers managing the effort, not necessarily doing the implementation, but kind of having some accountability for the bias towards action. So the 6 or so action teams that we have, and then we have kind of a morphed watershed planning strategic group that's on a more technical level that feeds into the action plans, the action teams, really giving them the tools so the CAP team comes along and says, okay, this is what we said we would do to the state to meet our reduction goals. We need to break it down annually because, like Matt said, we have a goal of 2025 of meeting those specific reductions, making sure that data is in there, making sure the case for Lancaster is being told over and over again, all the successes, making sure the stuff that didn't get counted. And so, it's just layer upon layer of giving these action teams, these partner groups, the stakeholder groups, the tools to really have a sense of accomplishment. And so, we have a list of ag projects, we have a list of stormwater projects, the BMPs. So we're really looking at both the stream delistings, so that the bugs, to making sure we're funneling those projects to those catchment areas so that those projects are happening and we're getting funding to them. And then we have kind of the other projects of where do we spend our money most efficiently to get the biggest impact. There's spending money doing planning. We've been doing that, like Matt said, for decades. Now it needs to be very strategic and it needs to be very targeted. So we have 20 sheets of templates of projects that we've broken into 2 sheets that say these are the implementation steps. And now we've ranked them to say, if we do this, we get a higher reduction rate. So we should really be focusing on this particular BMP as opposed to trying to hit everything. It's important to do street sweeping. You're just not going to get the type of reduction you're going to get for a repair in a buffer. So trying to balance that, trying to communicate that, trying to get all of our stakeholders and partners on board with moving those projects, finding the parcels, finding the landowners that are willing to do that. So that's really what the CAP team is trying to bring to this process of that nitty gritty. As somebody mentioned that, the nitty gritty, the attention to the details, and having some accountability. Everybody's doing a lot of great stuff. And I think we just need to kind of bolster that a little bit more and share all of our successes and build on those. So, if DP says, we can come to you with some money and are you ready? Yeah, we're ready. Like, we can put the shovel in the ground. So I know it takes time, and I know I'm often an optimist, and I have been doing this for over a decade. But now, kind of the rubber hits the road. So that's where the CAP team is bringing the resources to this established framework within the partners. The partners is really put that in place, put the framework of people together, and confidence and credibility. And we're really appreciative of that and all the work that they've been doing.
Thanks, Joellyn. Really appreciate the details there. Super helpful to understand how they play together.
Mhm.
Gordon, I'm gonna turn it to you. I know that agriculture is a huge component of life in Lancaster County. There's over 5,000 farms just in our county alone. And so how does the CAP impact that? And what are some of the reactions that you're hearing? You're one of the celebrated boots on the ground, getting to know landowner by landowner. And really, you have become a superstar of how to do that. So can you give us a snapshot of what does the CAP mean to the agriculture community in Lancaster? You're on mute.
Technology, who would have thought? Again, agriculture, as you mentioned, is one of the biggest target areas. And like I mentioned before, data is a key factor, and that's why ag is one of the big target areas, because we just don't have all the data that we should have at this point about a lot of the implementation that was done voluntarily. But now is a great time to be working on these farms, because I haven't visited a farm that doesn't want to do the right thing. One of the challenges in agriculture right now is, as you know, a lot of farmers are capital rich, but they're cash poor. They just don't have the funds, the cash flow to implement a lot of these best management practices, some of the larger ones, especially barnyard improvements and capturing stormwater around the buildings and barnyards. A lot of great soil health practices are in place. No-till, cover cropping, though those are up in the 80–90% implementation range. So very well implemented, but it's some of these mechanical high cost things that are a challenge. And the other side of it is that the marketplace, whether it's the dairy industry, the produce industry, is also on board in trying to encourage farmers to implement best management practices, just from a marketing standpoint, and being able to tell the successful stories of farmers and agriculture. So as the CAP works, as you mentioned, with the action teams, the Ag Action Team is basically a collection of a lot of the ag partners, the ag infrastructure, whether it's consultants, salespeople, et cetera, that involved directly with farms. They're all promoting this conservation effort. So farmers are I think, at the most willing point in history that we've had of wanting to implement, not only wanting to implement, but especially in our plain sec community, willing to accept cost share dollars and grants. That's almost completely accepted now among the plain sec community, because they know that's their future. So we're bringing a lot of information to these guys. I think, like we said, we're really trying to promote this boots on the ground, to visit every farm in the watershed or in the municipality, so that we have a better data set of what's been done, what needs to be done. And that makes it a lot easier to move forward when you have your to-do list, when your data set is complete, than when you have an incomplete data set and you're just kind of shooting in the dark. So that's some of the coordination that the CAP team's bringing to agriculture. And I think the other thing in agriculture, and I think across the board, that the CAP team brings, and it was kind of mentioned a little bit, is the two-way dialogue. It's not only them helping define and build the program from the request and the way the program's designed from DEP down, but DEP wants feedback. And so this is a perfect way to complete that circle of communication. The Lancaster CAP team has really done a fantastic job, and Clean Water Partners also, in communicating uphill, to the administrators and DP and so forth, of the needs we have. And not only are farmers willing to implement, but DEP, EPA are willing to give us the tools we need. And that comes from two-way dialogue.
Thanks, Gordon. Matt, do you mind speaking to your interactions with farmers and landowners a lot that have a lot more stream frontage? How has that changed? What is the role that the CAP, is it spurring anything new?
Yeah, so my role at the conservation district is for the last 20 years has been watershed specialist, really dealing with the water resources. When I started 20 years ago, I was pretty much doing it all by myself. So I'm happy to have all these partners and others come to the table and assist because we do have a lot of issues. But I see more willingness, not just from farmers, but from others as well. I think maybe some climate change differences have increased some of those storm events, and I think that has also spurred some of those interest in folks. But at the same time, I think the farmers in particular see that the regulations and requirements are getting more burdensome, not on them, but I mean in regards to overall, and they see there's a lot of resources out there that could assist them, that like Gordon talked about. And if they can take advantage of those in some capacity, there's a lot of partners out there willing to work with them. So I think they're understanding that, and they're getting a little bit more open to some of those handouts, you would call that, but I don't think it's really a handout. I think it's more of a assistance in things that they're struggling with, like Gordon talked about. They're capital rich, but maybe that cash is not there, and this is assisting them in doing some of that. So the streams aspect is something they've always seen, but maybe now it's a matter of, yeah, maybe I should put those trees on there to really, or maybe I should put that fence up to exclude that livestock out of there. And they're getting a bigger picture, especially the younger generation. We're seeing that quite a bit.
Thank you. Fantastic. It's so encouraging to hear what you guys are hearing from the landowners, but then how it all ties together and how having this strategy in place can keep all of the partners that are playing some kind of role moving in the same direction and aware of what each other's doing. I know we're not 100% there yet, but things like our collaborative mapping tool, things like the action teams and the role that the CAP coordinator team are playing are key components there. So I want to give you all a chance to answer. One other big question is, how do we know that we're reaching our goals? We say that we have these CAP goals, and the state has created this kind of tracking tool, but Joellyn, maybe if you want to give a snapshot, how do we know that we're making progress here?
So yeah, the state has what they're calling a WIP tracking tool. It's all the different agencies like SRBC, the Susquehanna River Basin Commission, other grant-funded programs that require reporting on an annual basis. They're all getting put into a program called Practice Keeper, which is kind of it's going to be the compartment in which they're going to crunch all the numbers for each of the counties and determine if we're making our reductions. And it's based on a modeling program. So if you say you're going to do a specific BMP, it has a modeling component to it to say that it's met that certain reduction based on the categories and specifics you provide, the length or size or acreage, that sort of thing. So that we hope will come out this spring. They are working on it. And so we're working, the CAP team and the partners are working kind of with an understanding that we're going to get some data, and Gordon's really been talking about the data piece here, that we're going to get some specific data. But in the meantime, the Lancaster Farmland Trust is actually, physically taking a list of their conservation plans that either they or a partner have done and put them into another document called Field Docs. So some of our partners are physically entering data that will then go into the Practice Keeper. The other piece is the CAP team is again, it's the accountability pieces. We have a list of projects that we are prioritizing. And so with our outreach and communications, we're just verifying that those projects are being counted somewhere. So that whether it's an annual report for an MS4 that they said that they were going to do a project or meet all of their minimum control measures, or it's a non-counted farm, an ag BMP. It's not a grant funded. It was somebody like the earlier project example of commercial industrial where they're going above and beyond that project, making sure that somebody is aware of that and documenting that. So in the end, there's a couple different things. The Practice Keeper is the be all end all. I think the watershed mapping tools so that we are putting in our own data. We are continually adding layers to help us do the analysis so that we collectively understand our collective picture. I think and I'll answer a question hopefully as part of this. There was a question about, do we have NMP reduction goals by sub-watershed? The MS4 communities were required to map MS3 drainage areas, which had to cover basically all of their land area. Where's all the water being drained into their MS4 to a specific outfall? And how do you do the reductions within that? So we can map that. We can put that as a layer in our watershed mapping tool and find out if, we can do an analysis if it's a priority catchment area, where is the biggest increase that we see related to NMP. And we've already done that and related to the stream delisting, so impaired waters. So there's a lot of data that we have. It's just making sure that we're using it to the best of our abilities and communicating it so that we can very specifically point to if DEP or EPA asks, yes, we are doing this project in this area, and based on this modeling, we're going to meet these reduction goals. And we know that it's a marathon. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And so as optimistic as I am, we have to be realistic. So using the mapping tools, using the practice keeper, using local collection of data, and that's why we have a specific team for data, because we think it's so important. We don't want to leave our progress and our story to an outside agency. It's really about Lancaster's story. So that's why we think the data team and the mapping tool, which came out of the watershed action team. And so they've clear collaboration right there, so that we can tell Lancaster's story and we can show the progress and we can show where projects make the best sense, because on the ground, there's a reason, and we can quantify that.
Awesome, thank you. So my last question to you all, Jonathan, are there ones from the chat box or the Q&A that we want to make sure we get to? You said there were a couple earlier on.
Yes, there's a couple here. I think Joellyn just answered the one about the reduction goals by sub-watershed, that does exist. I do want to hit home a question that David Hostler posed, and I think Gordon hit on this a little bit, but what is the relationship with the Plains Sect and community here in Lancaster to some of this work for clean water? I know that historically it seems that there's been a little bit of a hesitancy to take grant money from government money for these things, for these kinds of projects. Has that paradigm changed? How does that relationship work between Plains Sect community and some of this work?
Yeah, I'll start off there. Matt made a lot of comments regarding the Amish and that paradigm shifting. Matt made a specific comment about we're working with a lot of next generation Amish farmers, and what's happened there is traditionally the Amish always wanted to stay at arm's length from government programs, not community involvement, but government involvement, government programs, extension, FSA, all that sort of thing. And they've realized in their struggles in agriculture with their smaller operations that they can't ignore working, with some of these government programs. They can't ignore working with even those that are dairy farmers, working with their dairy co-ops and all the other ag infrastructure. So this generation that's coming along now has been encouraged to reach out to these different programs so that they literally can succeed. We see a lot of change in the Plains Sect community from agrarian to urban. A lot of farms are exiting the dairy business. They're going into non-farm businesses, and so you're seeing kind of this survival mode And so a lot of the Amish leadership are encouraging and actually creating programs for these next generation farmers to, reach out, utilize these programs. There's still some challenges there. One example I'll give is about 10 years ago, south of Intercourse, the Watson Run. So DEP came in there and did some surveys, and there were unfortunately some folks that were in speaking positions there that didn't know a lot about agriculture, kind of turned that Amish community off a little bit. But through the district and other local people getting involved, a lot of great BMPs got in place. And having just surveyed those farms this last week or two, when I walk onto a farm and dad's still there farming, he likes to reminisce about this hoopla of the Watson Run when it first got implemented. But if I'm talking to the next generation, they see the benefits that they're reaping from all those projects were put in, and they actually want to do more. So, to the Amish, it's changing. The other aspect I'll throw out is when you work boots on the ground with these farms, the mindset you have to have is you have to be able to manage change. A lot of these farms are small because they didn't adapt change. Obviously, a kind of a plain sect issue, kind of a glass ceiling. They were only limited to be so big. So now they're struggling for survival in a commodity business where size and scale wins at the end of the day. So if you go in with the mindset of helping these guys through the change cycle, you can be a lot more productive than going in and trying to really drive enforcement because this is the regulation, so to speak. So a lot of great changes going on there.
Great, thank you for that answer. For those of you who are looking, would like to ask some questions, there's still time to post some questions here. I see that Matt answered some questions from Mike. Thanks, Matt, for doing that. So one of the questions I have is we've talked a lot about agriculture, and obviously agriculture is a majority of where all of this, a vast majority where a lot of this pollution comes from. What about some other sources of pollution? What, in terms of, I remember as a kid learning about, parking lot, all that stuff has to run somewhere. And then we have a combined sewage overflow system in the city. And then, so what about some other sources of these nutrients or pollution that we might need to be concerned about here in Lancaster County?
Great point, Jonathan. Yeah, the built environment has a definite impact. When we look at nitrogen and phosphorus levels, it's not as big a reduction amount for the CAP, but it definitely plays a big role. And so things like green infrastructure that have been put in place in Lancaster City, green bump outs in a street, it may seem small, but it makes the water slow down and be cooler when it enters the system, the ecosystem. So those small changes that might be part of green infrastructure have a big impact. And those things can happen in urban centers like the city, or can happen in a small area like a strip mall center that's close right next to a farm. Lancaster County, I was just confirmed the other day that we are so unique in Pennsylvania that the intersection of agriculture and the built environment happens here more often and in a different way than anywhere else. So when we think about the MS4 permits and the flexibility that we need, when we took on that role to write the plan, when the partner said, yeah, we'll write it, we had a lot of questions. Say, what do you mean? What comes with it? What flexibilities are we going to get? If you're expecting different results, then how are the what's the behavior change going to be? And that was one of them. We asked for things like flexibility with the MS4 permit. And we've seen some of that come out with a mile outside of the urban area. You can do projects in that area that will count for MS4. We've seen them be open to ag practices counting for MS4 credit, even if it's on private property. So just a couple examples of how there is more flexibility and more options in Lancaster than other places. I will let others answer that as well.
Yeah, I'll just throw my 2 cents in here. And yeah, I think a lot of it has to go back to the ethic of Lancaster. And this kind of wraps everything up. Lancaster has always been leaders in regards to no matter what kind of industry we're in, but ag specifically and conservation. Yeah, we have a big lift to do here, as Allyson talked about, but I think DEP and our federal and state partners see that, look, if it can be done here in Lancaster and they're leading the way by doing these types of projects and giving us these recommendations, because they're seeing these as setbacks, what we've seen recently with this CAP and the WIP is they're a little bit more open to some of the ideas because Lancaster is leaders in regards to what we're doing and what we're trying to accomplish. Yes, it's a big lift, but I think with all these partners and the different kind of concepts and ideas that we're coming up with in regards to some of the problem solving we're doing, that's really why the state and feds are looking at us as, yes, it's a good opportunity to invest in Lancaster, so to speak, in conservation. That's what people are doing.
Great. It is fantastic to hear all this information. And I have one quick question before we wrap up here, and that is, Lancaster is obviously a leader in if you look at some of the data, we have a lot of the work to do here in Lancaster County. What other communities have we looked at as doing some things right that we have maybe taken and used here? Or is this something that we've really is very unique to Lancaster and how we manage a watershed? Don't everybody answer at once.
That's a loaded question, I think, Jonathan. I'm not sure. So yeah, there are some things that we're doing. I mean, I look at the city and what they're doing with their CSO. I mean, they're kind of a leader in this green infrastructure approach. But I also look at a lot of the farms that Gordon talked about and the challenges they're facing. You look at the amount of farms that Lancaster County has compared to some other states. We have more farms in our county than they have in their state. So, I mean, we're leaders, but we're also being leaders and looking at others as well. I mean, I can't specifically say one group that we're kind of following. Like we're the Lancaster County. We like to go off on our own and do our own thing, but we're also looking at others and seeing what they're doing as well to get a feel for what's going on. We're looking over our colleagues over in York to see what's going on over there. They have a little bit of a different approach. Doesn't mean it's right or wrong. It's just their lift is a little bit different than our lift, and their nutrient load might be a little bit different. So it's looking at what they're doing, looking how they're doing, as Gordon talked about, and Joellyn as well, looking at the data they're gathering, looking at the data we're gathering, and trying to piece all that together. Unfortunately, in the watershed business, there's really no similarities between watersheds. There are a lot of times they're a lot of different. So you have to be unique in your approach to solving a lot of these issues. So we're trying to lead as much as we can. If we can find others that we can copy off the way, then we'll go ahead and do that. But that's kind of how we looked at it.
I would like to pat ourselves a little bit on the back because being tier 1 counties, Lancaster and York, yeah, it's the biggest lift, but we also set the model for the framework. So when DEP went to the next tiers, they said, here's a framework and a process that worked in Lancaster. And so they're following that. So we set it up from scratch and now it's being replicated. So I think that that's a good pat on the back that we've had such great involvement from our community at large to help us inform that process, that it's being recognized.
And I see that replication happening from the funders too. National groups like the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation are using the collaborative model now for their next round of grant RFPs. And so we're looking at other similar collective models in the Shenandoah or on the Eastern Shore of Maryland or in inner city Baltimore, where there's a similar type collective impact approach. But like I said, we're leaning on Lancaster's success with United Way, with many of the other places that have used collective impact. We're using it in a clean water world, and that's still really unique. So we're excited for the success we've seen, and we know there's a lot of growth, which is why we want you all to be part of that along the way and keep using the work that we've done. Use that plan, use the CAP to make sure that it's integrated in every aspect of Lancaster County's work.
Thank you for taking time today. This has been, I've learned a lot along with the rest of those folks in attendance. Thank you for being with us today and taking time to out of your schedules to present. I appreciate it. So we will wrap up here. A couple of quick announcements before we head out. This video will be made public on YouTube at some point, probably next week. As always, we encourage you to share this video out throughout your networks, your family and friends, anybody who you'd like to send this video to, you think would get a kick out of it or find it interesting, be great. We'd love you to do that. If you'd like to attend these in person and receive or live, not in person right now, but and receive invitations to them, consider becoming an Hourglass member today. You may do that on our website. Also, we encourage you to sign up for our Keeping Lancaster Current newsletter, which goes out every week and features articles and has at times regularly featured clean water issues in Lancaster County. So we encourage you to check that out as well. Next Friday, next First Friday Forum, not next Friday, next First Friday Forum is January 8, 2021, and we will have the Lancaster County Commissioners join us for a question and answer session. Hourglass will pose the questions to them and they'll respond, and then hopefully have time for question and answers from the public as well. So we look forward to that. Thanks again, Joellyn, Gordon, Matt, Allyson, for being with me today. Appreciate it. And everybody have a wonderful weekend. And thanks again to Rogers & Associates, our sponsor. So thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.